Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana. And we're here today with special guest, Lara Land, who's here to share with us her new book, The Essential Guide to Trauma-Sensitive Yoga: How to Create Safer Spaces for All. While many people are turning to yoga for its stress-reducing practice, for those with past traumas, the practice can be triggering. So how can we shift this energy into a transformative experience? Lara Land's here to share with us just that. So Lara Land is a level 2 authorized Ashtanga yoga teacher with 2 decades of yoga experience. She has worked in Rwanda and India, among other places, teaching yoga and mindful living and developing programs to heal and empower. She's the founder of Land Yoga, a yoga arts and wellness center in the heart of Harlem, and her nonprofit community organization, 3.5 Acres Yoga. So let's welcome to the show, Lara Land.
Hi, I'm very happy to be here.
What an honor it is to have you here and to talk about your new book. What inspired you to write this?
Well, I've been teaching yoga for about 25 years. And during that time, I have had so many different people share yoga space with me. And I have seen and trained many yoga teachers. And I started to notice that there was a disconnect sometimes between the systems that yoga teachers were trained to teach and the people and what they were going through. So, kind of cookie cutter approach. And certain people, many of us now, especially these days, have some, traumatic stress, some stuff going on that requires a little bit more sensitivity in the yoga room when we're working with bodies and nervous systems.
So you start your book off by defining trauma. And I'd love for you to do that for our listeners because I think a lot of times people hear a lot of things, but they're not quite sure.
Yeah. And a lot of times when I'm talking about this book, I'm like, don't be turned away either because you don't do yoga or because you don't think you have trauma, because both of these terms are sometimes misunderstood. So, I mean, trauma, I think the first thing many of us think about is a traumatic event, an accident, maybe something with nature or medical. But there are many different things that can leave our system in overwhelm and cause us to adapt and behave after that event or multiple events in a new way, in an adaptive way, where maybe we're more closed off or we're more distant or we're more hypervigilant, checking around all the time. So, many of us have this because of maybe something that happened in childhood, maybe something that happened to our grandparents that caused our family that raised us to raise us in a way to protect ourselves against maybe a situation that's no longer present, but we still harbor those anxieties or those protections, and they're kind of with us in life. And sometimes we don't even know it or realize it. Sometimes trauma can come from lack, not getting our needs met, especially in early childhood, loneliness, grief, through oppression, not being able to express ourselves in our true, authentic way, because we feel we might not be accepted, or we know, we won't be accepted. So they're kind of day-to-day things that can lead to overwhelm and cause a traumatic response in the body.
And a lot of that can be different from what most people think. From what I understand, we hear about secondary trauma for first responders that, they're just in the front lines all the time, seeing things happen. And by that, they are being exposed to trauma itself.
That is right. Yeah. Last night I did an event and I met with some nurses. And, they are seeing trauma every day. And they are experiencing trauma through that witnessing. So, witnessing a traumatic event, even one, can leave us with trauma in our bodies. And those first responders, as you point to so accurately, they're seeing multiple traumas on a daily basis, and they're often not trained to deal with the emotional impact of that and how it impacts the body. right? We know when we're stressed, like certain things happen to our body. We often don't recognize it until we're totally like our back goes out, right? Or we have like really bad stomach pains because the stress has become so much, or we like can't move our neck, right? But leading up to that moment of, when our body finally says, listen, you have to address this, are all these little signs that we can become more alert to. And maybe doing, like I said, not everyone maybe considers himself a yogi or yoga practitioner, but in the book and in the practices I teach, we can do some small things throughout the day, not necessarily an hour and a half of yoga, that can help to relieve some of these stresses in our body so they don't build up to a full-on trauma response.
I like how in your book you talk about how yoga teachers are not clinicians. And it's just something to keep in mind. But having one that's aware of trauma, I think would be a really, a big deal.
Yeah, yeah. So both things are true. Thank you for pointing to that. Yeah, both things are true. And a lot of places in the book that I'm pointing to holding more of that both and, right? We have a place as yoga teachers, a really great opportunity. Sometimes doctors don't know what to do and they send their patients our way. Sometimes therapists send their patients our way. So there's lots of space for yoga teachers, if trained properly, to be really influential in a positive way in someone's healing. And we can't overpromise, and we shouldn't. That's where we get into burnout, or there's a disconnect between the teacher and the student. So it's important to kind of get trained and be in our lane and be part of a holistic wellness healing package that involves both talk therapy, embodied practices. There's lots of different things that can help us heal: community, movement, song. So I love what yoga can do in this web of healing. And I think the safer space that a yoga teacher can create, and getting trained in how to create more safety in the yoga room so you don't by accident re-traumatize someone through, just an accident, shutting lights, walking around over someone who's, maybe laying down and finally relaxing and then feels a hovering body over them, which, a teacher might do, not realizing that they could trigger someone. They could put someone into a flashback. So there are some simple strategies that yoga teachers can learn to create a safer space.
So you mentioned if we're hovering over somebody, what that would look like. And, I know yoga teachers will go around and check on everyone in the classroom. So what other ways does trauma show up in yoga spaces?
Oh, yeah. Well, sometimes a student might always need to be in a certain spot. They might need to be near the door or see the door. And sometimes a yoga teacher can think that they're helping by saying, mix it up, or why don't you move to the front of the room, and not realizing that it took so much for that student just to get there, just to be in that vulnerable space of breathing and moving with other people. And so allowing them to be in a position in the room where they feel comfortable, I think, is really important. Sometimes there's things we can do with our language to just soften the experience. So, we talked about all the kinds of events, or many of the kinds of events that could lead to a trauma response. Um, we didn't necessarily connect them. And what I say in the book is that the thing that connects all these trauma responses is really this loss of agency that happens in a traumatic event. So we wanted to get away, but we couldn't. We wanted to act differently, but we couldn't. And so we're stifled, right? And that energy goes into the body, gets trapped in the system, and causes this rupture. And so any practice, whether it's yoga or any other kind of practice that doesn't put agency first, it has a chance of creating harm. So things like inviting students into practice and giving some different options in the space, and those different shapes or opportunities in the practice, presenting them in a non-hierarchical way. So I don't feel like I'm better if I'm doing one thing or the other, but I have a real chance to explore what's happening in my body and what feels right for me. This is really, really important for a trauma survivor because often there's a disconnect that happens with the mind and body, which is very, very important to protect the individual. So the body's doing a really smart thing by zoning out, tuning out, by disconnecting from those feelings in the body, which are too much to be present with at that time. And yoga gives us this opportunity to reconnect to the signals of the body and learn to trust those signals again. But it has to be done slowly for a trauma survivor, and they need to be in charge of that. So they're in charge of their process and how much feels right for them, how much intensity they want to go into. And they just need to know that they have choice there and that any choice that they make is accepted and celebrated.
So, what are some ways that yoga, in a way, kind of softens the trauma response?
So there are many different responses to trauma. All of them are brilliant for protecting the individual and they're unique in each person. So we can't say like that they're always the same, but so, some typical ones are hypovigilance and hypervigilance. So either zoning out, this kind of disconnection from the body, feeling like almost an experience of life is happening to you, but it's not really you. You don't really feel in it. And then this hypervigilance, really jumpy, really activated, looking over the shoulder. Every sound can feel activating, hard time resting, hard time sleeping. And folks can move between both of these responses. So yoga, we know, is very regulating for the nervous system. It can help it to come more into balance between highly activated and underactivated, where we can return to a alert but calm state. This is the state that that human beings are healthy in, and where we can be responsive but not overly on alert. So through the breathing, through the grounding, it can help our nervous system to come to feel safe. The grounding practices of yoga, where we feel into our feet, where we feel our spine, the back of the body, recognizing the intelligence of the nervous system to protect us and knowing that it is there for us. Those are things that can help our nervous system to calm down and regulate, as well as the breathing. It can be an area that can be triggering at first for trauma, someone who's been through trauma, but ultimately connecting with the breath can allow the body to calm down, to feel safe again. And we can start to trust the signals in the body through yoga. And we can practice on the mat, feeling dysregulated, feeling off balance in a balancing pose, or putting ourselves into a bit of a twist or a bind, and then teaching the body that it's okay, that it can regulate itself during a more challenging situation. And then in real life, we can practice that again. So it's a great practice for the nervous system to figure out how to calm down in difficult situations. And there's other things in yoga that are wonderful as well, such as play. And, often after a trauma, there's a lot of shame, there's a lot of ruminating. And so practices which allow us to come back into play and exploration, to feel whole in ourselves again, building confidence, maybe through, doing something new with our bodies, or gaining some strength, is great for someone who's been through trauma.
Well, it would seem like grounding is such an important piece of when you're using yoga. What are your thoughts around that?
Well, grounding I absolutely agree. Grounding is essential, and it's one of the first pieces, right? Before we might grow into play and exploration, we want to get safe. And grounding is a technique which is used in many, many modalities In many therapeutic, even talk therapy models, the grounding is what allows our body to be present. So it's often used in therapy if or in a kind of someone is experiencing a panic attack or going into that, to just look at what's here and now in the room. We use our senses to ground into the present moment. I remember some years back, my father was very ill. He almost died, and they had to put him into a coma. And when they brought him out, he had a really extreme reaction to having been on so much medicine. And he didn't really know where he was. He was kind of like hallucinating. And the nurse told us to do that. Just ask him, don't do anything deep. Just ask him, what do you see? Do you see the clouds right now? What color do you see in the room? So I use those grounding practices when I'm training yoga teachers and with my students. I very often will just have them turn their head from one side to the other, just look around. What do you see? What textures are in the space? What colors are in the space? What play of shadow and light? And so we can ground with our eyes, we can ground with all our senses. And this grounding allows us to be present and to know that we're safe in the space and regulate the nervous system before we go into other kinds of exploration.
So in your book, you share stories about different people, but one of the things I was really inspired by is you talk about awareness. So how does that play a part in all of this?
Awareness. Yeah. I mean, building awareness and trust in ourselves is part of the yoga process. That self-awareness as a yoga teacher. There's so many layers to this. I'm like, which way should I go? From the teaching perspective, that's calling to me, it's understanding who I am when I walk into the room, knowing my background, my history, the cultural framework and viewpoint, worldview that I come from, and how that might filter how I see my students, potentially what I'm missing, is very, very important. So from the yoga teacher perspective, there's a lot of groundwork and awareness about ourselves and what we might be signaling when we enter a room, that's often not taught in the 200, 300-hour yoga teacher trainings, which is really essential for being in space with people and holding space, is like recognizing that I might have some blind spots. So that personal awareness as a yoga teacher, I think, is critical. And then from a student perspective, we're building awareness through the practice. Again, I mentioned that there's a kind of disconnect that can happen after trauma. And so we're starting to feel again into the signals of the body, which ones are valid. So it's not that we should never protect ourselves or, guard against danger, but that should be in a balance. So we start to again understand what is appropriate and what signals are right in our body. We start to feel again what feels good and pleasurable, what, ways that we like to move that feel right for us. We start to sense ourselves in relationship with others in the room and in the space. So this practice can really open us up. We start to notice in a pose where our mind goes and what kind of thoughts come up when we're feeling challenged. And are those thoughts necessarily true? Or maybe they're just thoughts. What happens if I stay for another breath? Do I stay in that same thought? Or maybe there's a new thought or a new possibility. Maybe a limitation that I believed of myself isn't really true as I start to explore it. So there's all this opening of consciousness and awareness of our thoughts and our nervous system and our triggers and how that's playing out into belief systems that, may not be accurate, that we get to test on the yoga mat, and which can really open our sense of ourselves in the world and shift our limitations.
In your book, you talk about relaxation as self-care. How do people get to that point when they're really kind of in still that trauma response?
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking about, I was working with some students last night, and this was a big topic. How I would say that's one of the biggest things that I see is that most of us, most of your listeners right now, um, are going through life at a pace, a kind of unnatural pace. And we almost feel more comfortable at a level of stress, um, where we've gotten so used to it and being very busy, or I'm stressed, I'm busy, I'm overwhelmed. It, in a way, protects us from feeling some other feelings, maybe feelings of grief, maybe feelings of the unknown. Um, I'm feeling into it as I'm talking about it. We don't have to go there if we stay in that busy, busy, busy. And when there's a lot that can be said about that from a social and cultural viewpoint, that we're almost tricked into busyness. So we don't have time to really dive into some of these deeper things um, that are present in our social structures today. So I think, slowing down and permission for self-care can feel really dangerous and really hard when we're in a trauma response. And like I said to my students, and I'll say it here, the first thing is to honor that that's the experience. Like, this is really hard for me right now. Slowing down is really hard. I'm not comfortable with that. And instead of saying I should be able to slow down, or I should be able to calm down, we can just be with that it's hard. That's really the first place to be, is compassion around that, and just holding that. And, you know, slowing down, I'm kind of noticing could maybe yield some good results for me. Like, maybe this rushing around, maybe that's not working for me so much anymore. I'm seeing that it's causing some negative health outcomes. I'm noticing in my relationships, they're not feeling as vibrant, maybe as fulfilling. I'm missing out on some things. So holding both, right? It's hard to slow down, and I'm needing that. I'm noticing that I'm needing that. I'm being with that, right? And so where is there a moment? Maybe I can start with one moment where I allow a little more space. Maybe it's closing one activity before I step into the next. So just looking at transitions, maybe when I'm in my activities, I'm just not ready to slow them down quite yet, but I can close one activity before I go into the next meeting. Just take a breath, take a beat, take a moment to check in with myself, ground, feel my feet, feel my body, have a glass of water. It can be literally a second, 1 second of just closing one thing before coming into the next. And that's self-care. That right there is self-care. And that can be the start of it. And usually what happens is if we just start with something small and we start to notice, actually, this does feel good. Actually, this feels right on my system. It's a little scary. It's a little new, but I think deep down, I know inside that this feels better. It feels more healthy. It feels more whole and right. I'm going to start to get curious and want more of it and bring it into more areas of my life. So with everything, I say, start small.
And for those yoga teachers out there that want to start incorporating, um, a trauma kind of informed yoga practice, how do they go about doing that?
Well, there are trainings out there. I travel around giving trauma-informed yoga trainings to yoga teachers. I'm not the only one. There are a lot of great trauma-sensitive trainings. When I started in this area of concentration, I don't know, 15 years back or something, it wasn't something people talked about, but now it's definitely more out there. So I have a nonprofit called 3.5 Acres Yoga. We train yoga teachers online. We have a training coming up end of September. And then independently, I also run trainings all over. I travel to different yoga studios. So that's a good way. I would just get trained, in 10 to 20 hours. It's a good enough amount to stop doing certain things that are like the big ones, to just have some consciousness around the topic and to start incorporating some level of trauma sensitivity into classroom. And of course, there's my book that's out. So that details, some ways we can be more trauma sensitive in the yoga room. And there are great podcasts out. I mean, I think that now there's a lot of information out there for folks who want to, dive into trauma sensitivity.
So, how are some ways that a yoga class can be built to be a safe, kind of trauma informed area?
Well, inclusivity is really important. So before we even walk into the yoga class, that yoga studio, the way that they are marketing, what is the face of yoga? Is it just for one type of person, or are they really welcoming students from a diverse in every way body of students, by showing that it's not just for one body type, even in the images that they present on website. That's the first level. And also, in who you're hiring, just looking at who are the yoga teachers that you're hiring. Because it's not just about attracting a student body, but it's about all sorts of parts of your yoga shala or studio or business there. So that's the first thing, is really being an inclusive space where people feel welcome and accepted as they are, and they can relax because they're not feeling judged. And is it accessible from an ability standpoint? Do you have chairs? So folks can practice yoga in a chair. Do you have props for people? Things like that, right? There's some just really basic things we can start with that can make the space safer for folks. And then there are things like, maybe not playing music, or really considering, if you're going to play music, how that might impact students, right? Music is definitely one of those things that can trigger a memory, and might not be safe for everyone, or it can trigger emotion. Not that emotion is bad, but when it's kind of prescribed onto us, that might not be the same as when we're in that agency of moving into a sensation and feeling like, okay, I'm in charge. I'm going to allow some sensation, some emotion out, as when like someone is putting a song on, in the movies, they do that, put a song on that makes me feel a certain way. And in the same way, one of the things I talk about a lot in the book that yoga teachers can do right away to make the space safer is just to stop prescribing that, like, this pose will make you feel calm, or this pose will make you feel like this. Because if I'm in the pose and I'm not feeling calm, and I hear the teacher tell me I'm supposed to be feeling calm, I'm going to go into a whole spiral of, why aren't I? Am I doing it wrong? And instead of being in my body and in reaffirming my connection to my body's signals, and reconnecting those signals, and trusting in what my body is telling me, which is really, really important for all of us. I think we're all at some level disconnected because of the pace of society, but especially for someone who's actively in a trauma response, they really need to learn to trust in what the body is telling them.
Well, Laura, where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about your work?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm at laraland.us. Everything can really be found there. My nonprofit is 3.5acres.org. And I'm most active on Instagram at Lara Land Yoga. I have a podcast called Beyond Trauma with some fantastic guests from all modalities, EMDR and somatics, and just looking at trauma healing from all different frameworks. And of course, I have a new book out called The Essential Guide to Trauma Sensitive Yoga, which you can grab off my site or, all the places that books are sold.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really been an honor. I've enjoyed your questions, and I think this will build a lot of folks' interest in trauma-sensitive yoga.
Well, thank you, Laura. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, The Essential Guide to Trauma-Sensitive Yoga: How to Create Safer Spaces for All. The Essential Guide to Trauma-Sensitive Yoga is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. And if you don't see it on the shelf, ask for them to order it. And remember, support our indie bookstores. We're going to pause here for a quick moment, and we'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors.
With Breath Hub, you'll experience the transformative power of breath as it harmonizes your body, mind, and spirit. Recommended by experts in fitness, sports, psychology, and medicine. Meet the scientific way of being well. Breath Hub. Breathe better, live better.
Are you a coffee lover who wants to make a difference? Look no further than Fire Department Coffee, a veteran-owned business that gives back to support first responders in need. Each batch of coffee is freshly roasted right here in the USA by a dedicated team of first responders and coffee experts. So when you enjoy a cup of Fire Department coffee, you're not only drinking high-quality coffee, you're supporting members of your community. Start your day with a coffee that gives back. Visit firedepartmentcoffee.com. That's fire, D-E-P-T, coffee.com.
Are you looking to untangle life's riddles? Discover the profound teachings of Dr. Shai Tabali, renowned philosopher, best-selling author, and your guide to self-empowerment. With methods that harmonize psychological and spiritual principles, Dr. Tabali's wisdom offers a pathway to holistic transformation. Take that first step today and join thousands globally and embrace the journey to higher consciousness. Visit shaitabali.com, that's SHAITUBALI.com now.
Are you chasing profitability yet losing fulfillment? Let me introduce you to your solution, the Relaunch Company. I'm Hillary DeCesar, an entrepreneurial performance coach, fearless leader of the Relaunch Company, here to help put the pedal to the metal and relaunch your business your way. Visit www.therelaunch.com. Take the free quiz to learn 3 steps towards waving goodbye to burnout and hello to success.
The book Terminal Cancer is a Misdiagnosis, authored by Danny Carroll, is on sale at Amazon now. Licensed psychologist and psychotherapist Tessa Antia-John-Guerra commented, "This is one of the most empowering books on the topic of cancer you will ever read." Award-winning author T.L. Needham commented, "This recommended book can be understood by anyone seeking answers, hope, and alternatives to a terminal diagnosis. Buy it now on Amazon.com.
Pandemonium. Fast forward 20 years. A U.S. president seizes control of all U.S. missiles, the power grid, the banking system, and every computer in America as he hides in an underground bunker. Pandemonium, a captivating sci-fi thriller where a hidden war, psychics, aliens, artificial intelligence, and transcendental love collide with the latest media technology. Pandemonium, live to all devices. Get your copy on paperback or digital. Free sample at getpsychic.org.
Hello, Dr. Cutler here. Do you experience bloating, heartburn, food craving, bowel irregularity, food sensitivities, weight issues? If you do not digest your food, you may be deficient in macronutrients, which your body needs for optimal health. DrEllenCutler.com teaches that this is an enzyme deficiency. I believe the most important supplement is a full-spectrum digestive enzyme, Dr. Ellen's Way Digestive Enzymes. Hear more about it at DrEllenCutler.com.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
I'd like to thank Jason Eastwood at Guitarfulness for sharing his inspiring music and talent with us. His music is known worldwide for cultivating atmospheres of harmony, inner peace, and clarity. Visit Jason's website at guitarfulness.com. Join his newsletter, be part of his community, and download his music. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary. A recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.